The Arctic Circle. Deep under the ice sits one of the biggest reserves of natural gas known to man. To get to it, it'll take a state-of-the-art gas refiner, a giant metal monster. And this is it. It weighs a staggering 35,000 tons, and it's bigger than a football field. The trouble is, it's been built in Spain, 3,000 miles from the Arctic Circle. Now all they've got to do is get it there. It's an epic engineering challenge. How do you move a colossal gas rig weighing thousands of tons from the south coast of Spain up to the frozen Arctic Circle? To start, you need the world's first ever floating gas refinery. It's got to float so that it can be picked up by one of the world's biggest cargo vessels. And the only way the cargo vessel can get it on board is by sinking under the water. When it comes back up, the rig's on top, ready to be carried to the Arctic Circle. Sounds crazy, but that's the idea. To pull it off, all you need are some brilliant engineers with a lot of nerve. Rafael Rodriguez is a senior marine engineer from Madrid. It's her job to get the giant rig to float and to keep it afloat. If she gets it wrong, $400 million worth of industrial kit sinks to the bottom of Cadiz Harbor. Domingo Paz Marino, engineer and deep-sea diver, is responsible for the lives of 12 men. These diving engineers have to fix the underside of the massive rig as it floats in the water, and it's one of the most perilous jobs in the whole operation. Arnie Reed is the man with the daunting job of getting the world's most expensive gas refinery onto the world's largest and strangest heavy lift vessel. One wrong move and he loses both ship and rig. They're all experts in their field, but experience will only take them so far because this is an engineering challenge that has never been attempted before. Hammerfest in the Arctic Circle. This is the world's most northerly town, unbearably cold except for a few short summer months. But this small fishing port is about to be transformed. Because deep beneath the Arctic seas off the coast from Hammerfest sits one of the largest known reserves of natural gas in the world. 250 billion cubic yards of methane is buried a few miles beneath the frozen Arctic Sea. A vast untapped reservoir of energy. It's summer now and the engineers are drilling a staggering 2 miles into the seabed. From here, they've got to pipe the gas 100 miles beneath the sea to Hammerfest, and then turn it into liquid fuel. To do that, they need the largest and most advanced gas refineries ever built. But here's the problem. How do you construct a giant, high-tech gas plant in the biting Arctic winter when the temperature is freezing cold? You don't. You build it in Spain. Cadiz in southern Spain. For 2 years, 3,000 workers have been building Statoil's massive refinery here. 4,000 tons of pipes, 700 miles of electrical cable, 46,000 cubic yards of fireproofing and insulation, 10,000 tons of industrial pumps, gas tanks, and other equipment. This is one mother of an Arctic gas rig, and they call it Snow White. It's July 2005, and work on the rig is all but finished. Now comes the biggest engineering challenge of all. Snow White has been built in the shape of a large rectangle to fit perfectly onto one of the world's largest cargo ships. But how do you get her on board? No crane in the world is big enough to lift such a monster. Instead, Snow White must be towed out to meet the ship in the middle of Cadiz Harbor. Sounds good in theory, but will it work? It's 4 o'clock in the morning. In 30 hours' time, the giant gas rig known as Snow White is due to leave Cadiz Harbor. The rig was built on a sandbank by the dock, and that's where she's still sitting. But now, engineers are preparing to float Snow White for the first time. Lazaro Gonzalez, the dockside supervisor, explains the operation to his men. This is the first floating gas refinery ever built. None of these men have attempted anything like this before.
La idea es quitar todo el agua de la barcaza cuando la marea está bajando y luego es la marea la que nos la sube. El tema de las bombas, ahí tenemos, para el que no haya estado metido en el tema, un gran entresijo de tuberías, bombas, mangueras hidráulicas, cables de sensores de sondas. Por favor, que todos los trabajos que tengamos que hacer pasen por Manolo, no vayamos a desmantelar algo que esté operativo.
Snow White has been built on a series of 15 massive tanks, each containing roughly 1 million gallons of water. At the moment they're full and the rig is sitting safely by the dock on the sandbank. But when the water is pumped out, the tanks effectively become metal balloons, lifting the refinery out of the water. At least that's the theory. The trouble is, to fit Snow White onto a ship, she's had to be built in the shape of a huge brick. She's tall and top-heavy. It's vital that the water is pumped out of the ballast tanks at exactly the same rate. Otherwise, Snow White could capsize. This is a critical moment for the engineers on the rig, who are controlling the operation. She may be young, but Rocío Rodriguez is a highly qualified senior marine engineer, and she's in charge of floating Snow White into the harbor.
We're pumping the water out in a controlled way so that we can be sure that the boat is touching the ground. The pumps have been working for 30 minutes, and we're now checking that the flow of the water is as we predicted.
But within only a few minutes, things start to go wrong. Rocío's fear was that some of the pumps would work at different rates, and that's exactly what's happening. Every minute the rig is getting lighter in the water, and its center of gravity is shifting. If she can't fix it, $400 million worth of industrial kit could soon find a new home at the bottom of Cadiz Harbor. Ballast engineer Manuel Leal arrives to find out what's going wrong. She calls Lázaro, the dockside supervisor, to tell him the problem. His dock workers would have to use massive ropes to secure the rig if it got into difficulties.
Saco los tres con todas y allí sale igual. Por ahí se ven un montón los caños, por eso me he dado cuenta que están las dos bombas funcionando de los tanques 31 y 41. Pero dicen, ahora la siguiente media hora no van a trabajar. Es que vamos muy rápido, si esas bombas van muy rápido, entonces la paramos. ¿Es
necesario que no trabajen y se lo punto?
Ya, no, lo que pasa es que igual lo que hago es que acaben antes ahora. En vez de a la media hora que se acaben.
Shutting down the pumps has bought Rocío some time, but she hasn't got long. It's only 6 hours before high tide, and with half-empty ballast tanks, Snow White is sitting light in the water. As the tide comes in, the rising water is likely to lift the rig off its sandbank, whether it's properly balanced or not. It's just before dawn, and the legendary Blue Marlin, one of the world's largest heavy lift vessels, arrives in Cadiz Harbor right on schedule. The Marlin is a very unusual cargo ship as she's designed to carry only one thing at a time, one really big thing. If you fancy a cruise on the Blue Marlin, it'll cost you about $250,000 a day, and the clock starts ticking the moment she drops anchor. Now that she's in Cadiz, every second counts. Its captain is Latvian, Mikel Poznaks, on the right. But as his ship comes into harbor, he hands over to a local pilot, Carlos Valle.
2.3. No, half a stern. Half a stern.
They don't know whether Rocío has managed to float the rig, but then they've got worries of their own. Statoil's precious gas refinery has been designed in the shape of a giant brick to fit exactly onto the Blue Marlin, but this makes it tall and top-heavy, and this makes the crew of the Blue Marlin nervous. Because when Snow White comes on board, the rig and the ship will share the same fate. If one keels over, they both go down. And if you're sitting tall and top-heavy in the water, you have one thing to worry about above all else. This is one of the windiest stretches of coast in the Mediterranean. It enjoys plenty of sun, but it's also exposed to the full force of the Atlantic gales. That's terrific if you're a wind or kite surfer, but it's a real headache if you're an engineer trying to float a tall gas rig out into the harbor. It's 10 a.m. and Rocio has been called to an emergency meeting of senior engineers. The tanks are still holding water and the wind is close to the upper safety limit. But high tide is expected in 3 hours. Delaying the launch could spell disaster.
More or less the same. Yeah. The values?
We have taken out 16,300 tons of water, approx 300 tons less than the ideal situation.
And the weather forecast?
Yeah, the wind's a little higher than the forecast, but what we've seen, the last measurements are still within the range. But you've seen those, so.
The decision lies with this man, Henrik Sverdrup, a highly experienced marine engineer representing the insurance company underwriting this massive project. His word is law.
If Agos wants to continue that person, I have no objection.
But as they've been meeting, the wind has been picking up. It has now reached nearly 30 miles per hour, which is over the safety limit. Snow White sits tall in the water. Once she's floating free, she'd be almost impossible to control in high winds.
The barge is 156 meters long. From the waterline and up, we are talking about 45 meters. So you have an extreme large sail area. So the wind is really the factor here, which you have to have control over.
The wind is too strong to go, but Snow White's ballast tanks are half empty and the tide is rising fast. To make matters worse, there's no sign of the pilot tugs which must steer the rig if she starts to float. Rocio calls the harbor master.
Hola Ángel, mira, que estamos aquí, está aumentando bastante el viento. Entonces era para ver cómo lo veía, si es posible o no la maniobra, porque ya estamos, la barcaza ya tiene que flotar, no podemos mantenerla varada. Sí, llaman a prácticos, pero es que no estaba ni Carlos ni Luis. Dile de todos modos, coméntaselo, que es muy urgente, porque es para saber qué hacemos.
The Blue Marlin is gradually maneuvered into position by Chief Pilot Carlos Valle, supervised by the Blue Marlin's Captain Posnax.
1.5 knots speed.
This extraordinary vessel has a revolutionary design, enabling it to carry phenomenal loads. Its hull contains 71 ballast tanks. Using a series of huge 2.5-ton pumps, the tanks are flooded. The whole ship then sinks 10 yards beneath the waves so that a load can float above the submerged deck. Once the gas plant is exactly in position, the captain will start to pump out the tanks, lifting the ship back out of the water with Snow White on top. But to make room for the sunken ship, a massive hole has been dug in the bottom of Cadiz Harbor, 330 yards long, 109 yards wide, and 21 yards deep. All they've got to do is find it. Using global positioning satellite systems along with traditional charts, Captain Posnax and Chief Pilot Valle attempt to maneuver the ship over the pit. Back at the dock, Henrik is wondering whether to cancel the launch. The pilots still haven't got back to Rocio.
Si los prácticos no quisieran, o seguro no quisiera, que hacer.
Esperar
La siguiente marea.
a la marea para bajarla. Y inundando tanques.
Creo que marcador,
ya no podemos parar.
Rocio thinks they've already gone too far to pull back. Whatever they do now, the barge will float at high tide. She can only hope that the wind dies down. Whatever happens to the rig, the captain of the Blue Marlin has to be ready. As the nose and stern of the ship move directly above the trench, the Marlin's massive anchors are dropped one by one. According to the ship's sophisticated electronic systems, they're right on target. Which is more than can be said of the gas rig. Rocio was right. As high tide approaches, the decision has been taken out of their hands. The launch is on. Rocio races off to meet the tug pilots who have arrived just in time.
When the barge is floating, it's ours. When the tugs are connected and the movement starts, it's the captain who's responsible.
Heinrich is nervous of the strong wind and is demanding an additional pilot tug for safety.
You keep the fifth one here.
Would you like everything right now?
I don't want him here now. I want when we start. I want all over here.
Thousands of workers have spent more than 3 years of their lives building Snow White. And now it's time to say goodbye. It's the end of a job, a moment of satisfaction, sadness, and a certain tension. The giant refinery slowly edges away from the dock. The barges appear to be having difficulty steering. Snow White is not a boat. She has no engine or rudder. She's a 35,000-ton floating brick. But she seems to be sitting evenly in the water, much to Rocio's relief. The first leg of its voyage, the rig will travel just 330 yards to a temporary berth to allow a diving team to inspect the hull.
Los dos cabos primero que largamos son que vamos a tirar a tierra son el 5 y el 10. Tiramos la primera gaza que enganchamos en volardo en tierra, y luego la segunda gaza.
But as they get underway, there seems to be a great deal of confusion over how Snow White should be moored when she gets there.
5 y 10, el número que nos dais no lo tenemos aquí puesto.
El 1.
Esta es la posición de la barcaza, ya una vez que está.
This is the position of the barge. Once it's moored, these are the 6 defences, which will protect the barge. And these are the ropes that will tie it up and secure it against the dock to prevent any movement of the barge.
La estancia número 10 va al volando número 3. El 3 es el primero y el volardo número 9 el segundo para la estacha número 5. Los primeros son el 3, volardo 3 y volardo 9, perdón, volardo 3 y volardo 9.
No, que vamos para atracar ya en el muelle de la cabecera sur, que se llama.
We're going to dock over there. There are some cylindrical buffers where the barge will be moored. There are 6 of them to support it. In 20 or 30 minutes, the barge will come alongside the dock. The impact has to be gentle so that the barge isn't damaged.
The challenge now is to stop the refinery smashing into the dock. The chief pilot, Carlos Valle, is in charge at the stern of the vessel, the section that will be moored first. Carlos has to ensure each mooring rope is secured correctly and to coordinate the 5 tugs to stop the rig from hitting the key buffers too hard.
Cargazos por largo hacia la rampa rojo, con fuerza.
The first attempt at docking has to be aborted. The barge veers off course and Carlos orders the docking operation to start again. Once again, time is against them. Slack tide is over, and as the water recedes, the currents in the harbor are getting stronger by the minute. The rig must berth quickly.
Todos los remolcadores parados, todos. No, hombre, no, por favor.
Dale fuerza,
Pero ya estamos apoyados con todos, Paco. The riggers were not fast enough, you know. They were not aware about what I want to do. and they got a little bit confused. And during this moment, we lose the control of the bow.
Despite the problems, Snow White has survived her first short voyage.
In the end, it was all fine. We've nearly finished. We just need to attach a few mooring ropes to secure the barge, and then we're done. We're very happy.
Muy contentos.
Since Snow White is now finally floating, it's possible to inspect beneath her hull for the first time. There's only 3 yards clearance beneath the hull at this dock. Barely room for a team of divers to do their job. And it's one of the most hazardous engineering jobs in the world.
No estás cómodo ahí, ¿no?
Relativamente, tengo mucha corriente.
Mucha corriente. Corriente dirección sur, ¿no?
Domingo Paz Marino is the team leader. He's been diving for more than 20 years in every part of the world. Working underwater beneath the rig is dangerous. Visibility in the narrow gap under the hull is just 18 inches.
El primero que tú vas a ver entonces es el longitudinal, ¿no?
Es transversal, de manga.
De manga a manga, transversal.
The team's main task is to check out 480 large metal bars which are welded to the bottom of the rig. These 6.5-foot long bars are called anodes and are vital to protect all steel vessels from corroding in seawater. A small electrical current is passed through each anode. The charged metal now attracts oxidization from the vessel, which means the anode rusts, but not the hull itself. The anodes are designed to have a lifespan of 50 years. The engineers fear that some may have been damaged during the plant's construction.
If there are any loose anodes, we have to cut them off, or they will damage the deck of the Blue Marlin, or our barge.
The good anodes are marked with a long cable tie to avoid confusion when the damaged ones come to be removed.
So far, we've found 3 loose ones, and after confirming with Statoil, we will mark them and then continue checking.
Such engineering tasks are straightforward enough on land, but when you're diving beneath a giant hull, the smallest problem can be life-threatening, as one of these divers is about to find out. Jan Erling Nakestad, the diving coordinator for Statoil, arrives at the rig. He's come to check on progress, but he's especially concerned about the safety of the divers.
How are you, my friend? Okay? Everything's okay.
The greatest worry with this kind of diving is air supply. Snow White is the size of 1.5 football fields, and once you're underneath, working in pitch black against strong currents, it's easy to become disorientated. If there's any problem with the breathing equipment, it's almost impossible to get out in time. The umbilical links the divers to the world above. It's the lifeline which pumps down oxygen and nitrogen to the divers. The mix has to be just right, and so does the pressure. It also carries television pictures and sound up to Domingo as he guides them through their tasks.
Yeah, check one of those ones, but only one. He can select it himself. Álvaro? Espera, mira, límpiame la conexión de la patilla soldada. Ahí, donde tienes el dedo.
Sí, está perfecto, pintado, no hay grietas, no hay corrosión y la soldadura se ve bien, vamos, que no presenta ninguna anomalía.
Suddenly, one of the divers seems to be in difficulty. His oxygen feed appears to be failing. Jan wrestles with the umbilical control box to adjust the air pressure. It's hard to tell precisely what's wrong with the mix. They have to alter the flow and wait to hear from the diver.
Tony. Tony, tú estás bien, ¿no? Tony.
Dale, es okay.
Vamos tirando de ti, ¿eh?
Out in the harbor, the Blue Marlin is preparing to take on its load tomorrow morning. Members of the crew are checking the heavy wooden runners which have been attached to the deck. These are meant to support the rig and protect the anodes on the base of its hull. Tonight, Captain Posnax must sink the Marlin, an operation that takes 8 hours. The ship only arrived at dawn, but there's no time to spare.
С проверяющим, я думаю, что они там творят. Хорошо, ясно.
Divers have located 8 damaged anodes beneath the hull. Now they've got to go down again to remove them.
¿Ves si tiene luz?
No, no tengo luz.
Pues entonces hay problemita. ¿No tiene luz?
Sí, ya tengo. Dame un poco más de intensidad.
Un poquito más intensidad.
First, they must attach ropes to the faulty anodes, then cut them off using powerful oxy-arc torches. But the current is getting stronger all the time and is dragging the divers from the mooring point. The men are finally ready to start burning off the anodes.
Casey, cuando tú me digas, yo tengo todo, está todo arrancado, ¿eh? Te doy corriente.
Vale, dame corriente.
Corriente. ¿Acordando? Más intensidad.
Cutting through thick steel is tough enough on the surface, but it's a nightmare when you're in a narrow gap underwater in pitch black, and they're working against the clock.
¿Cayó? Ok, perfecto. Todo cortado.
It's 3 a.m. The Blue Marlin is submerging into Cadiz Harbor. Its deck is sinking steadily beneath the surface. The marine engineers from Cadiz have never seen anything like this before.
Annie, Michael.
Yes.
20.
The buoy is in place when they were yesterday night or this night. All 4 buoys in place now.
With the Marlin's hull submerged, Captain Posnax checks that marker buoys are in place. A giant invisible cargo ship hidden just beneath the surface poses an unusual hazard to any unsuspecting vessels crossing the harbor. It's 4 a.m. now. Rothio and other key players have gathered on the dockside. Among them is Arnie Reed, Captain Posnax's boss. He's a former sea captain himself and is here to supervise the loading and safe delivery of the Marlin's valuable cargo. Snohvit is due to leave dock at 6:30 a.m. and the rig's builders, Drogados, finally transfer responsibility for the world's first floating gas refinery.
Anyway, too time.
No problem.
Rothio Rodriguez's work is done. It's too early to celebrate, but she's clearly relieved. For this young engineer, it's mission accomplished. But for Captain Reed, the challenge is only just beginning. The rig is ready to start its journey. It's 6:30 now, and slack tide is in 2 hours' time.
Take off.
Docking with the Blue Marlin must be completed as the tide turns, when the water is at its calmest, a window of just 30 minutes. Last-minute nerves and a quick panic over which end of the rig is which.
No, los prácticos saben que la proa es eso y la popa es esto, sí. No, están correcto cada uno. En popa vamos a alargar
The harbor master gives the order for the first rope to be released. The rig, guided by 5 pilot tugs, slowly inches away from the dock once more. After After 7 years of planning and 2 years of building, Snow White finally starts her journey north.
Bueno, Blue Marlin, vamos ya navegando para allá, ¿nos veis? 40 para salir, popa enfilada con el muelle norte de posición. Podemos poner rumbo ya tranquilamente.
The early light reveals the Blue Marlin sitting low in the harbor. On board, Captain Posnax makes his final checks. Snow White is floating perfectly in the water. Rothio's calculations appear to be spot on. Although Snow White is sitting well balanced, she's moving slower than expected. If they miss slack tide, the strong currents will make the loading operation extremely dangerous. On the deck of the Marlin, a tall metal post has been erected. When the ship is sunk, the post remains visible above the surface of the water. This is the guide post, used by Arnie Reed to steer the rig into the exact correct spot. It's vital that Snow White is perfectly positioned over the Marlin. If she's not, there's a danger the ship will keel over as it lifts out of the water. And now the pressure is on. They've only 30 minutes to raise the ship before the tide begins to go out. Otherwise, the massive ship will be sitting with only 3 feet of water beneath its gigantic hull. As the rig moves closer to the ship, Arnie Reed takes command. A motor launch makes its way to the rig, carrying the end of a massive winch rope. This is one of several ropes which will pull Snow White towards the ship and secure it in position. Carlos, who is perched precariously on the corner of the rig, radios instructions. Snow White is now being gradually winched towards the Marlin. If anyone slips up now, 35,000 tons of gas refinery will rip apart the bridge or stern of the ship. It's going to be a tight squeeze.
Why not? This tug must slack the line. Let this tug go. He cannot control his line. Let it go. Yeah, let it go.
Arnie issues frantic commands to the rope handlers in an effort to winch the giant rig into the right position without damaging it or the ship. Despite the size of the ropes and the enormous weight of the refinery, this is a delicate rigging operation, and with the end of slack tide, the current is getting stronger all the time.
Hold number 7, we're moving. Don't slack on number 7. It's tight, Number 7 is on the brake. Hold number 1 also, hold number 1.
A second guidepost indicates that the rig is almost in position over the Marlin.
Heave number 4, heave number 4.
Before the rig drifts off center, Arnie must secure it. This is a delicate rigging operation. The ropes are expected to take the massive 35,000-ton load which is moving with the currents. Arnie and the crew are also feeling the strain.
No, come back to this one, Run, come back to this one. Primero.
If any one of these huge ropes were to snap, there'd be a deadly whiplash. There's a lot riding on this rigging job, and the buck stops with Arnie.
Put it on the brake and connect the other one.
Finally, the ropes are secure. One last nervous check of the guidepost. In theory, Snow White is right where she should be. The time has come. Captain Posnax gives the order to raise the ship out of the water. As its massive ballast tanks are pumped dry, the mighty Blue Marlin slowly rises from the bottom of Cadiz Harbor, and as it does, the world's first floating gas refinery is lifted majestically out of the water. Together, the Marlin and the rig weigh a staggering 100,000 tons. It's an awesome sight. The world's strangest cargo ship taking aboard an extraordinary passenger. The fates of Snohvit and the blue marlin are now inextricably linked, and it's time for them both to embark on their historic voyage. This state-of-the-art gas purification plant will travel on one of the world's largest heavy-lift vessels, up the Atlantic coast of Spain and France, through the English Channel, into the North Sea, and into the Norwegian Sea, finally docking 11 days later, if all goes well, at Hammerfest in the Arctic Circle. The Marlin makes stately progress up the coast of Portugal, but as the voyage goes on, it'll become more difficult. Her journey will take her through treacherous waters. The forbidding English Channel, North Sea, and the Norwegian Sea are all busy shipping lanes, and they're all subject to strong winds and storms. The Marlin and her crew must travel 3,000 miles to reach the Arctic Circle. The voyage should take them 11 days and nights, and every day, as they head further north, it's getting steadily colder. Hammerfest in the Arctic Circle, the world's most northern town. Statoil workers have been making the most of their short summer with parties, beer festivals, and beach volleyball competitions. They've already prepared much of the Statoil gas processing plant, and now they're waiting for the final piece in the jigsaw, the giant gas refinery known as Snohvit, built in Spain and finally making its way towards Hammerfest on the cargo ship the Blue Marlin. After 11 days at sea, the Marlin, weighing 100,000 tons with its massive load on board, finally moves into view around the fjords. They prayed for a calm passage, and their prayers were answered. Now comes the final engineering challenge. The gas rig was designed to fit exactly onto the Blue Marlin. Now it must be offloaded and fitted into its final resting place, this rectangular dock, connecting it with the rest of Statoil's Arctic gas processing plant. When it's working, this huge maze of interconnecting pipes and tanks will form the heart of Statoil's gas processing operation. Over its lifetime, it will suck in millions of tons of natural gas every day and convert it into liquid fuel. Before Snohvit can be docked, she needs one last inspection by divers. They must check that none of the metal anodes on her hull have been damaged on the long journey from Spain, and it's another perilous job. Diving here poses its own special problems. The water temperature is far colder than in Spain, and the Arctic currents are very strong. Yet the diving engineers must stay under the rig for as long as 3 hours at a time. To survive, the divers have to wear dry suits 2 inches thick, lined with platinum. The fjord is also incredibly deep. Before they can swim beneath the rig, it must be offloaded from the Blue Marlin. First, water is pumped into the ship's ballast tanks, allowing the Blue Marlin to submerge into the fjord. As it does, the ropes are released, and Snohvit gracefully floats off. Arnie Reed breathes a sigh of relief. His job is done. The divers have already started checking the anodes on the hull. But there are unexpected problems. Many of the heavy wooden beams from the deck of the Marlin have attached themselves to the rig. The currents beneath the hull are also proving to be dangerously strong.
Øystein, du må også være obs på hvis det noen sånne plankebiter eller trepute. Ja, det må du være litt obs på når du svømmer.
Some of the massive beams are falling from the rig. Others must be cut off. But in the fast-moving waters, they pose a serious hazard to the divers. As the tide comes in, a simple operation becomes complicated. A diver returns, exhausted after 2.5 hours battling the icy currents.
Vi ser 50 meter på lyset. Jag såg det till slut. Men såg du mig heller?
Nej, men jag tror att jag flyttade mig fram när jag kände bara dra i umbiliken, så flyttade jag mig fram och 2 anoder, så att det var slut.
Men nu, de 3 sista räcken, så alltså strömmen tar han ränner ju där nere.
Ja, visst, men strömmen kan inte göra någonting, utan jag...
For the engineers at Hammerfest, this is the moment of truth. Snow White must be guided into her permanent home. 4 massive winches begin to pull 35,000 tons of floating gas refinery into dock. This is the most advanced gas refinery in the world. It cost a staggering $400 million to build. It took a lot of effort to get it here, and there's no room for error. Incredibly, there's only 2 feet of clearance on either side of the rig. The dock has been lined with wood, and the wood has been coated with a ton of grease. But will it be enough? The rig is moving surprisingly fast, and the wood is loudly cracking and splintering under the tremendous pressure. Snow White inches further towards the buffers until at last, and in one piece, the giant rig comes to rest. The jigsaw is complete. They said it couldn't be done. The vast gas reserves buried beneath the frozen Arctic Sea were too remote. The Arctic winters were too cold. But here it is, the first remote-controlled subsea gas production facility in the world. And at its heart, the world's most advanced gas refinery, built 3,000 miles away in sunny Spain. They said it was impossible. But engineers like Rocio Rodriguez, Domingo Paz Marino, and Arnie Reed found a way.